Today we're going to do a tier ranking and find out which state is the most purple. Now this is not just for president, it's also going to be for the other statewide races, especially US Senate and governor. But even the US House and state legislature could be a factor. And this is also mostly going to be looking at what already happened over the past 4 or 5 years. It's not necessarily a prediction about what's going to happen in this election. So this is going to be subjective, it's difficult, you're going to have some different tiers, but I've got A, B, C, D, and F. F are going to be the least purple and least competitive. There's no S tier. A is going to be the highest you're going to get. So let's try to not take forever on this. We've got Alabama first. Of course, this is a red state pretty much across the board, except for Doug Jones, who did get elected back in that special election in 2017. So if you go back that far, you might bump it up to D. I think that's a little bit out of range, so I'm going to put this in the F tier. Next, we've got Alaska. This is kind of a red state on a presidential level and in the Senate. The U.S. House, though, they put in Mary Peltola, the Democrat. They've got a Republican governor. The state legislature is kind of competitive. I think all that considered is enough to put this in the C tier. Next, we've got Arizona. Here's a former red state, potentially a blue state in the works. Republicans have just come up short in the key races here over the past few years, so this state might be becoming less competitive over time. But for now, I think there's still enough here to put it into the B tier. Next, Arkansas. I don't think there's much to say about this state. It's going to go in the F tier. Next, California. Here's another one. Overwhelmingly blue. It's going to go in the F. Colorado is next. If you went all the way back to 10 years ago in 2014, they did elect Cory Gardner to the U.S. Senate. Since then, though, Republicans have pretty much fallen off a cliff here. It's not the absolute bluest state out there, so I can understand putting that in the D tier, but for me, I'm actually going to put this in the high F tier. Next, Connecticut. Prior to the last governor's election, there have been some close ones, but Republicans pretty much have nothing going on here. The best they can hope for is to get one U.S. House seat. It's going to go in the F tier. Next, it's Delaware, and that's also going to join Connecticut in the F tier. Next, Florida. Here's a state that has become less and less purple over the past few years. It used to be the pinnacle swing state, but now I think it's going to be the first state that gets down to the D tier. Next, Georgia. Here's a fairly purple state. 2 Democrats in the U.S. Senate, a Republican governor, and like with several of these states, there's going to be some gerrymandering, especially at the state legislature, and even though the state might be slipping away from the Republicans, for right now, I think this is going to be the state that's going to be all the way at the top in the A tier. Next, we've got Hawaii, blue state. Even if it trends a little bit toward the right due to the wildfires, this is going to stay in the F tier. Next, we've got Idaho. This is pretty much the opposite of Hawaii. This is a red state. Democrats pretty much have nothing going on here. They're not competitive. It's going to go on the bottom. Next, Illinois. They did elect a Republican governor here back in 2014. If you include that, you could put this in the D tier. But other than that, statewide, Republicans pretty much have no action here. This is going to go all the way in the bottom. Next, Indiana. Here's another state where if you go back to 2012, they did elect Joe Donnelly to the U.S. Senate. That would bump this up, but everything since then, it's not competitive. It's going to go next to Illinois. The next state is Iowa. Here's one that has slipped away from the Democrats. It's kind of cemented itself as a red state. Democrats do control one statewide office here, so we're going to put this in D. Next, Kansas. Well, this is a red state, but Democrats have a 2-term governor there in Laura Kelly. They also have 1 U.S. House seat. So there's a little bit going on here for the Dems, but overall it's pretty red. You might want to put it into C for Laura Kelly, but I'm going to put it in the D tier. Next, Kentucky. This is kind of similar to Kansas. It's a red state, even more so than Kansas. Republicans dominate here except for governor. There's another 2-term Democrat in Steve Beshear. So for that reason, we can't put it in F. We've got to put it in D. And then we've got Louisiana. They did have John Bel Edwards for governor prior to Jeff Landry. Plus, Democrats are looking to pick up a 2nd U.S. House seat here. So it's a tough call, but ever since John Bel Edwards in 2019, Democrats have nothing going on here, and I think that's going to be enough to put this just into the F tier. Next, we've got Maine. They've got an independent U.S. senator and a Republican. For governor, they have a Democrat, and the state legislature is Democratic. In the U.S. House, it's 2 Democrats, but they do split their electoral votes. There's a small chance this becomes competitive for president. There might be enough here to put this next to Alaska in the C tier. Next, Maryland. And of course, this is one of the bluest states out there, except we had Larry Hogan for 2 terms. Now, he last won in 2018, so that was a little while ago. So I'm going to say that's kind of similar to Louisiana, and ever since that election, it's going to be way too blue, and it's going to go in the F tier. Next state, Massachusetts, that's also going to go in the F tier. Next, Michigan. Republicans had success here in the previous decade. This decade, not so much. They lost all the statewide races. They took a hit in the state legislature. Trump won it in 16. It should be competitive this time. If you just focus on president, it would go up a tier. But all things considered, I think this state does lean blue. So I think that's going to actually just keep this from getting into B tier. It's close, but I'm going to put this just high enough in the C tier. Next, we've got Minnesota. Here's a state where Republicans have had very little success. They've got a split U.S. House delegation, but they can't seem to notch any statewide wins. It does look like they won the popular vote last time in the state House and Senate, even though they're controlled by Democrats. So on a glance, this state looks bluer than it is. I think there's enough here to put this in the C tier. Next, Mississippi. That's going to go in F. Next, Missouri. Ever since Nicole Galloway, the lone Democrat, won her statewide race for auditor back in 2016, Democrats have had nothing going on. So just over the recent years, there's enough here to put this all the way at the bottom. It's not really competitive or purple. Next, Montana. For president, Democrats have had no success here. They've got John Tester in there in the U.S. Senate, so that does count for something. They've previously had Democrats for governor, so there is a willingness to support either side. I think there's going to be enough here to put this in the C tier. Next, Nebraska. I think this state is just going to be too red. This is going to go in the F tier. Next, Nevada. Here's a state that recently elected Democrats and Republicans for the statewide offices. For president and U.S. Senate, Republicans have come up short here. However, for the state legislature, Republicans overwhelmingly won it last time, at least in terms of the popular vote. But due to the gerrymandering, Democrats overwhelmingly dominate the state legislature. So this is actually a pretty purple state. There's enough here to put this all the way at the top in the A tier. Next, New Hampshire. Here Republicans have come up short in the U.S. House, Senate, and for president. But for governor, the state legislature, and I think I'll get bonus points for mentioning the executive council. That's where Republicans have had success. So I think it does depend on the candidate here. And I think there's enough here to put this above some of these states at C. It's going to join Arizona in the B tier. Next, New Jersey. Post Chris Christie, the GOP has had nothing to brag about here. It was closer than expected for governor back in 2017. But I don't think that's enough. I think that's going to go all the way in the F tier. Next, New Mexico. It's not one of the bluest states on here, but in terms of electoral success, Democrats have had it here, Republicans haven't, so that's going to go down in the F tier. Next, New York. Even considering what happened in 2022 where Republicans gained a few seats, they still don't have any statewide wins. The last presidential election was a complete blowout. I think that's still enough to keep this all the way on the bottom. North Carolina is next. This is kind of a red-leaning state overall, but it's not overwhelming. I think it's purple enough to get it all the way into the B tier. Next, North Dakota. The days of this state electing Democrats are pretty much in the past. This is going to go in the F tier. Next, we've got Ohio. It's a pretty red state, except they've got Sherrod Brown in the U.S. Senate. So because of that, I think there's enough there to put this in the middle of the pack. Next, Oklahoma. It's just going to be too red. It's got to go in the F tier. Next, we've got Oregon. There's just not enough here for the Republicans. It's going to go in F. Pennsylvania is next. Republicans do control 2 of the statewide offices here, but they're not really any of the critical ones. Ever since Tom Corbett won in 2010, Democrats have won the next 3 governor's elections. The GOP did have Pat Toomey win in the U.S. Senate. Of course, it's gone back and forth for president, so it is competitive. It's fairly purple, but I think it does have a little bit more blue in it. I'm going to put this in the B tier. Rhode Island's next. I don't think there's much going on here. That's going to go on the bottom. South Carolina is also going to go on the bottom, along with South Dakota as well, and Tennessee. They're all on the bottom. And then we've got Texas. This is a tough call. Of course, the state has trended away from the Republicans over the past several cycles, but Democrats have yet to pull out an elusive win here. The blue wave of 2018 is starting to fade from memory, and even though it's not as extremely red as it used to be, I don't think it's all that purple, and I still think there's enough here to probably keep it in the F tier, but I can understand bumping it up to the D. Next, Utah. Even though they're going to be open to supporting an independent candidate here like Evan McMullen, this is just too red of a state. It's going to go in F. Vermont is going to be way too blue of a state. However, Governor Phil Scott, believe it or not, he is a Republican. So because of that, I'm actually not going to put it in F. There is tangible success here for the GOP, and that is going to put it up into the D tier. Next, Virginia. Republicans had a nice 2017 here, but it's going to be blue for president, and it's been blue in the U.S. Senate, but I think there's still enough here to put this into the C tier. Next, DC, that is going to go on the bottom. Washington State. I don't think there's enough here to take this out of F. I'm going to have to put this on the bottom. West Virginia is next. This is going to be similar to Vermont. It's overwhelmingly partisan in favor of the Republicans. However, due to Joe Manchin in the U.S. Senate, I think that's going to be just enough to join Vermont in the D tier. Then we've got Wisconsin. I think this is pretty much as purple as it gets. In the midterms for the statewide offices, they did elect Democrats as well as Republicans, and it's not going to get much more bipartisan than Ron Johnson in the Senate and Tony Evers for governor. Plus, it's gone back and forth for president. It's going to be competitive this year. That is going to go up into the A tier. And the last state is Wyoming, and this red state has all the makings of the F tier. And that's it. That's all the states. And obviously there's a ton on the bottom. And some of these other states have some anomalies that make them a little bit more purple than they might seem. So you might have some different criteria and emphasize some different things. I try to not make it too stressful and be as consistent as I can. The thing to remember is some of these tiers are borderline. So I know in the comments, some people are going to disagree on some of these tiers. But when you have 5 tiers, some of them are going to be extremely close to the others. But I'm going to leave it there for now. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about these states and these tiers? How much weight do you put on electoral success for each office, and how much weight do you put on the past as well as the future? Let me know how you came up with your tiers down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.